friends, welcome to Beautifully Bookish Bethany, where I have new videos every week about books and the geeky mom lifestyle. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read in the first half of November. Okay, so it is time for my mid-month wrap-up. We're about halfway through the month of November. The end of the year is coming very quickly. It's pretty wild. I have been reading a lot, but I have to say, and maybe this isn't shocking, coming off one of my best reading months of the year in terms of quality and quantity in October, this month has been not bad. I'm reading a lot, but in terms of quality, I haven't had a lot of high highs. I've had some not so great books, some mediocre books, a couple of very good books. But just as an FYI, this definitely isn't another month of me having read a ton of amazing books, but I for sure have some gems in here and then just some solid picks. So let's get into it. In the first half of November, I read 15 things. I will say a couple of them are very short, but then a couple of them are pretty long. So it's been kind of an interesting mix. If you are new to my mid-month wrap-ups, the way that I do these is I talk about all the books that I read in chronological order. So at the end of the month, you'll get my wrap-up where I give all the stats for the month and talk about all the books that I read from lowest rated to highest rated. But for my mid-month wrap-up, I'm just going to talk about them in the order that I actually read them. So with that said, let me pull up my little spreadsheet here. So this month, the first book that I read was an audiobook that I got out from my library. This is Ties That Tether by Jane Igharo. I got this as my Book of the Month Club pick. And, you know, I had very mixed feelings about this. Thematically, I really liked some of what this book was doing, but in terms of the execution and some of the story choices, it was a little bit more of a mixed bag. So what's this book about? It's an adult romance novel about a woman who grew up in Nigeria, moved to Canada when she was, I think, about 12 or 13, and is now an adult woman with lots of familial expectations. Her family wants her to marry a Nigerian man, and she ends up falling for a white guy and has to make some decisions about whether she's going to let her family choose what she does or not, and how she feels about that and how it affects her identity. I think this is a really interesting story, and in terms of the ways that it's dealing with some of those issues of interracial and intercultural relationships, I think it's great. I also think the representation of what it's like to be an immigrant seems to be great, and I've heard good things about that part of it from friends of mine who are also Nigerian immigrants, or parents were Nigerian immigrants. So I like those elements of the story. However, there are a couple of things you should know. Number one, this is not in the dust jacket, but it really should be, and I feel like the marketing people should have put this in the description because it happens almost near the beginning of the book and it's not spoilery. But the entire plot of this book centers around an unexpected pregnancy. So that's a thing you should know if you're wanting to pick it up. People tend to have pretty strong feelings about the use of an unexpected pregnancy as a trope in a romance novel, and I think there are people reading this and being like, what the hell, I didn't know this was in here. Yeah, they should have written it in the copy because it happens like very quickly, and that's kind of what the whole plot centers around. So love it or hate it, FYI, that's here. There is also a lot of melodrama, a lot of miscommunication, a lot of grown adults not really behaving like grown adults, and I didn't love those elements of it. I didn't love the way that it was using the pregnancy as part of the plot, although some people are gonna have different feelings on it. So that's definitely a mixed bag for me. I ended up landing on 3 stars for this because there were some things I liked, but FYI going in. The next book that I read was an audiobook that I got from Libro FM, so thank you so much to them. If you're interested in checking them out, they are linked down below. They're an alternative to Audible that supports indie bookstores, and I had one from a few months back that I hadn't gotten around to yet, and it's called Quality Land by Mark Uwe-Kling, and this has actually been translated from German, I believe. It's an adult science fiction novel that's, I think, supposed to be a little tongue-in-cheek, kind of a parody of what if we were in this semi-dystopian, utopian, dystopian, I guess is the question of the book, right? But future that's hyper-capitalist and hyper-consumerist, and kind of takes a lot of the things that we're seeing and trends we're seeing with social media and with Amazon and with algorithms and marketing and stuff to an extreme, and then throws in some like AI, and it's interesting, it's entertaining, and it's definitely interesting, it's entertaining, it's got some cool ideas, and I can see why this was very popular. Ultimately, I didn't love it. There were some perspectives of perspective characters that I was not terribly interested in, and I kind of wanted more in terms of character development. There was really only one character that I cared about at all, and I feel like the focus was more on, well, what's this world and what are these ideas we're playing with? And yeah, I don't know, like I liked it, but I didn't love it. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars, but I think this is one where your mileage is really going to vary. I can see why some people would be super into this, but I wanted more from it. I think I think part of this too is it felt a little bit to me like maybe the author was a little in love with his own brilliance. You know, like you kind of get a little bit of that vibes of like, oh, I'm so smart for having these ideas about how bad things could get if this is how the world was. And it's not actually reinventing the wheel. And I feel like some of that feeling comes across in the tone of the book a bit. Maybe I'm wrong. That was just the vibe that I got. But I did like it. I thought it was interesting. The audiobook was fairly well done, so 3.5 stars for that one. Then I read an e-arc of My Last Duchess by Eloisa James. This is the latest book in her Wilds of Lindo Castle, I think, series. I think I've read all but one of these books that are out so far, and none of them are like, oh my god, favorite books ever, but I feel like she writes really interesting, solid historical romances that I have like small things that I don't love about them, but they're a good time and they're pretty consistent with interesting characters. This one, though, is actually among my favorites of the series, but this one's interesting because it's actually a prequel novel. So this is following how the Duke and Duchess, who are the parent figures in most of the series, originally got together. And there's a little bit of insta-love happening there. Although I feel like given the time period, some of it kind of makes sense. There's some cute kid interactions here, and I just enjoyed it. Like, I kind of liked seeing it. Both of them have had other relationships in their past, so they're coming into this relationship as more mature adults. He lost his first wife in childbirth, and then his second wife was like a piece of work who left him for the guy she was having an affair with and left her kids there. So he needs a mother for his now like 8 children, some of whom are grown. And she is a widow who loved her first husband. He was more a friend than like a passionate love affair, but they did love each other. And she has a daughter, a 2-year-old daughter, and so it's really nice. I liked it. I liked the like maternal side of it. I enjoyed seeing these older characters come together, and yeah, I gave this one 4 stars. If you like the series and that setup sounds good to you, I think it's one worth reading. And it feels kind of like a holiday book because it's set in winter. In fact, when they first kind of meet and talk to each other, there's a big snowstorm and they're caught in a carriage in a snowstorm, so it's got kind of wintry vibes to it. I enjoyed it. Then I read Super Fake Love Song by David Yoon. This is another one that I had for review, and this one was a little bit of a mixed bag for me. I think the concept was a good one and entertaining, and there were things that I liked about it. I didn't like it as much as his first book. His first book, Frankly in Love, I quite enjoyed. This one is about a super nerdy teen boy who pretty much tells a lie about who he is to impress a new girl. This new girl comes to visit his house because she knows his family, and she sees his older brother, who no longer lives there's bedroom, and his brother had been in this like cool death metal band, and assumes it's his room, and he's like, yeah, I'm totally in a band. And then like this turns into a web of lies as he gets his geeky friends together to help him like make a fake band to impress this girl. So parts of it are really entertaining and over the top. I don't know, like the ending, I didn't love the ending. If you want to hear details on this, maybe check out my Goodreads review. I don't want to get super spoilery about it, but I had kind of mixed feelings with this one. There were parts of this I definitely enjoyed, and I do like the messaging of, in some ways, coolness is in the eye of the beholder, and also high school isn't everything, and like even if you're not cool in high school, maybe you will be later. But just know this entire thing centers around a lie, and they proceed to have an entire relationship based on The Sly that doesn't come out for a very long time. And yeah, so people are gonna have mixed feelings about that. I ended up giving this one 3 stars, so not a bad rating. I liked it. I didn't love it. Okay, then I read another e-arc. It's been a lot of like pumping through things for review. I read an e-arc of American Christmas by Adriana Herrera. This is a holiday romance novella that was very sweet and also quite steamy. This is a male-male romance. It's a novella in her American Dreamer series. One thing I will say is I have read 2 out of 4 of the books in that series, and I don't think I've read the book that these characters appear in. So this is following 2 side characters. They've now been together for a year, and this is their first Christmas living together. And this, I think, is really cool and really sweet. It's like an actual Christmassy kind of holiday novella that is in some ways playing off of Gifts of the Magi. It's that kind of traditional story where the husband and wife each buy a gift for the other person by selling the thing that would be useful with the other person's gift. So it's kind of playing off of that, but in a fresh way. At first I was like, oh, okay, like I see where this is going, but then the way that the ending wrapped up, I just thought was really beautiful, and I won't spoil it for you, but I really enjoyed this one. So this follows Yin and Ari. They were both American immigrants. Yin had been a child refugee in a refugee camp in Myanmar before coming to the United States as a refugee, and Ari is Afro-Latinx. And one thing that I think is great about this, and this is something that I feel like Adriana Herrera does really well in her books in general, is it's got a lot of diversity, but it really fleshes out some of the underlying issues that can affect people with these kinds of backgrounds. And so in this case, part of the story is about both of them working through their own internal issues and trauma in the context of a relationship. And I just thought that was done really well. Adriana Herrera is Afro-Latinx, and she is a social worker who works with victims of domestic violence and sexual violence, and I think you can see some of that bleed into the way that she writes her books, which is fantastic. If you've read the American Dreamer series, you're going to get cameos from all the characters that you love from those books, which is always a good time. The one downside of this, I will say, is because it's a novella, and I think this is something, it's funny because you're going to see later, I read another thing that included a sort of novella-length story from Adriana Herrera, and I feel like in general her novellas feel like they should have been full-length books, or should have been longer maybe, because there's so much backstory and so much info that we're getting. And so I think because of that, the earlier part of the story is a little info dumpy, where we're getting a lot of information on the history of the characters, the history of their relationship, bringing us up to speed of where they are now. You may or may not be bothered by that, but I didn't love it. But once things got into the actual plot, I was very into this. It was very sweet, and for those reasons, I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I had a audio review copy from NetGalley of a book that was super fun. Not like the most amazing book, and you kind of need to know what it is you're getting with this, but if it's your deal, I think you're gonna have a really good time with it. This is The Bright and Breaking Sea by Chloe Neal. It is a super swashbuckling fantasy adventure with a female captain and political intrigue and a heavy dash of romance. And this is a critique that I've seen. My friend Leanna at Leanna's Library was reviewing this and was like, I don't know how to feel, because like there was too much romance for it to just be a fantasy adventure and too much fantasy adventure for it to just be a romance. And she's not wrong. Like, I wasn't so bothered by that because I think I knew going in it was going to have a strong romantic streak, but it is true. You should know going in. This is not quite a fantasy romance because it's got a lot of plot happening, but it does have a strong romantic thread through it. And if you like that, I think it's really enjoyable. It's a lot of fun. It's very action-packed. It's very fast-paced. It's got an interesting world that's kind of like an alternate historical England, but with like a young black woman as the queen, and I don't know, it's fun. It's got magic, it's got politics, it's got spies and boats, and I don't always love things set at sea, but this one like was done well, where I feel like she probably did her research, but it didn't spend too much time focusing on the ship aspect of it. So not a perfect book, but I did really enjoy it, and I gave this one 4 stars. Okay, so then the next thing I read was actually, I was doing one of the podcast episodes where I was talking to Oh, where I was talking to, I think, Tori and Jade. Was it the podcast? I can't remember if it was a podcast episode or one of their videos, but I think either Tori or Jade from Bedtime Bookworm somehow made me aware of this thing I hadn't previously been aware of, which is this series of short stories, sci-fi short stories that are available for free to Amazon Prime members by big authors. And I was like, oh, this is cool, let me look into this. And so I've now, so far this month, listened to 2 of them because they're free on Audible and I'm an Amazon Prime member. And they are very short. So the audiobooks of these are like an hour and a half to 2 hours long. So not long at all. So I'm not going to say too much about them, but I think it's kind of a cool collection and I'm probably going to continue listening to them. And this is one of the ones where I'm like, yes, it's 15 things, but like 2 of them were short stories. So just do with that what you will. I also read a couple of novellas, you know, yeah. So the first one that I listened to was Arc by Veronica Roth, and I liked this. I didn't love it, but I think part of it's going to just depend on your taste. It's a very quiet, thoughtful sci-fi story, which wasn't maybe what I was expecting from her. It's set on a post-apocalyptic Earth. Basically, the world's about to be destroyed. Most people have already left, and a handful of scientists are staying behind until the last minute, cataloging plant life, basically, that's going to go with them. And the main character is a woman who's a scientist who's part of this team, and a lot of this is just kind of her reflecting on her past on Earth, the beauty of life, the value of discovery and science, and it's like a quiet, thoughtful little story, and I enjoyed it. I do think it drags. It's a very short story, but it's slow. Like maybe a little too slow, but some people seem to really be loving that. So I liked it. I didn't love it. I wanted a little bit more from it than what we got, but I think it's decent for what it is. And you know, it was like a nice way to spend an hour or so. And so I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then I read what is easily my favorite thing that I have read this month, and it is a book that was not on my TBR. I did have an audio copy of it from last month that I was able to get from Libra FM, and then I had seen that the book was illustrated and decided to go splurge and treat myself and buy myself the book. And I was like, I feel like I'm gonna love this book. I really hope I'm right, because it's not a cheap book. Thankfully, I was right. And so that book is Plain Bad Heroines by Emily M. Danforth. Oh man, I loved this so much. It was so good for me. I totally get why this is not going to be the book for everybody, and I feel like often many of my favorite books I say that about, because it is long. It's a very long book. It's just over 600 pages, and it's got a lot going on, and it's a little bit slow-paced and character-driven, but I loved it. It was so good. And I highly recommend, if you're able to get your hands on a physical copy, to read along. The audiobook is done really, really well, but the physical copy has illustrations through it that I think add quite a lot to the experience of reading this book. And okay, so let me think. How do I want to talk about this? So it's being pitched as a queer horror comedy set at or surrounding a all-girls boarding school, which I was like, yes, that sounds great. Let me pick that up. A few things you should know about this. So this is like so hard to talk about. I wonder, should I just do like an individual review for this book? I'm like, maybe. Okay, you know what? I think I might actually do a standalone review video for this, because there's a lot to say about it. I wrote a very lengthy Goodreads review, which my Goodreads is always linked down below if you want to see that. But I'm just going to say this is definitely slow-paced. It's got multiple storylines that it slowly weaves together. It's a quiet horror novel. The horror is not front and center. It's like a slow creeping dread and moments that are pretty creepy, but it's really about the characters, about the storytelling. It's unabashedly queer and focused on women. Yeah. I just love this. And it's one of those books, kind of like The Starless Sea. I feel like if you loved The Starless Sea and you like horror and you like the idea of what this book is doing, you will probably really love it, because it's a similar approach, I guess, to storytelling, even though the genre is different. It's also in some ways a love letter to unlikable female characters, which, you know, always hold a strong place in my heart. So I understand why a lot of people are not going to like this book, but I really, really loved it. Right now it's sitting at 5 stars, but honestly I think it should be a 6. It's one of those ones I've been sitting on, so I'll let you know in my final end of month wrap up where I land with this. But I was a fan. And I'm so happy. It was really nice, honestly, to read something that wasn't on my TBR, and then lo and behold, it ends up being the best thing I've picked up all month. All right, moving on. I will do a standalone review video for plain Bad Heroines because I'm realizing I have a lot to say about it. The next book that I read is one that is short, but it definitely packs a punch. That is Passing by Nella Larson. This is one that I've been meaning to read for a while, and I'm really glad I finally got around to it. It's a classic of the Harlem Renaissance, written by a Black woman about the experience of passing as white, and racial identity and sexuality. It's a really interesting book, and one that, like, I gave it a rating and I'm still not sure if it's the right rating. And it's one that I kind of want to revisit again in the future and read again now that I kind of know what it is. It's a really interesting book. It follows our main character. She is a Black woman who can pass as white, but she chooses not to. She has a dark-skinned Black husband. One of her sons is darker skinned, and she lives in the Black community. But she reconnects with a childhood friend who has chosen to pass as white, and in fact has married a white man who doesn't know that she's Black. And things kind of go from there. It's a slower, kind of character-driven story that has an amazing amount of resonance still today. I think thematically this is such an interesting book. One thing that I think is very interesting is that while our main character in some ways kind of judges her friend for choosing to live life passing as white, she herself is in some ways passing as this kind of sweet, mild-mannered, malleable woman, which she really isn't. And we see a lot of that in her relationship with her husband, which I think is interesting, that she's hiding a lot of herself for various reasons. The other thing that I think is interesting after reading reviews, I can definitely see it, is that you could also read this as having queer undertones in the relationship between the two women, which I think adds such a fascinating layer on top of it with everything that happens. And I don't want to get into spoilers, but yeah, this was a very interesting book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I'm not sure if that's the correct rating that I should have given it or not, but it's striking. I think it's well worth your time. It's not a very long book at all. It's like under 200 pages. Yeah, one I'm still thinking about. Yeah, okay, so then I read probably my least favorite book of the month. So that's fun. This is The Comelot Betrayal by Kiersten White, the sequel to The Guinevere Deception. Okay, so this is her reimagining of the tale of Guinevere and Camelot with a changeling Guinevere as the main character. And, ooh, how do I talk about this? So, I don't know how much I can say about my thoughts about this without spoiling book 1 in the series. So if you haven't read book 1, you might want to skip over my discussion. But before I get into spoiler territory, I'll just say that in general, I found the first like 60 to 70% of this book to be painfully boring. I was so bored. A lot of stuff was happening, but it wasn't moving the plot forward at all. It was just like random side things and like, we're gonna go do this and we're gonna do this. And I was like, why should I care? I don't know. I also find Guinevere to be a very bland character. I don't care for her all that much, and the book is most interesting when we have interesting characters on the page, and they introduce a new character about 65% of the way through the book. And then once she was there, things got really interesting. So like, I'm like, can we just like leave the first 70% of this book or like condense it all? That's terrible, I know, but I was not a fan of this. I gave it 2.5 stars. Those were some of my issues with it. My other issue is something that's going to spoil book 1. So if you've not read book 1 yet, you may want to skip forward to the next book. But one of the big twists that you learn in book 1 is that Lancelot is female. And I was really interested when I discovered that, and with the way that book 1 ended, even though I didn't love the Guinevere deception, part of the reason that I wanted to continue on in the series is I was like, okay, are we getting a bisexual Guinevere? Because that's interesting. Obviously, the love affair between Lancelot and Guinevere is a big deal. And you know, if you're retelling the story with a female Lancelot, that's going to be maybe the expectation of the direction it's taking. So I was curious. I was like, okay, like, let's see what we're going to get here. Having read book 2, is Guinevere bisexual? I couldn't tell ya. I couldn't tell ya. I think there's something near the very end that might suggest that Lancelot is into her, but just being really honest, a lot of this book feels kind of like queer baiting, and I didn't love it. I didn't love the way it was handling that relationship. I was like, what is this? Like, we're talking like it's friendship, but like, are we supposed to read things into this? I feel like Lancelot's into her, but is she? We're in Guinevere's head, and nothing in her head is giving any indication, as opposed to her continuing to find Mordred super attractive and being like kind of into Arthur, but more friends with Arthur. I don't know. It's messy. I didn't like it. I'm not going to continue on with the series. 2.5 stars for me. Your mileage may vary. So, okay, then I had an arc of something. It should be, by the time you're seeing this video, it should be available. So if you want to pick this up, you can. But a collection of erotic historical romances that I had gotten an e-arc from one of the authors. This is Duke I'd Like to F by Sierra Simone, Joanna Shupe, Eva Lee, Nicola Davidson, and Adriana Herrera. Quite the lineup of authors, quite the title, and yes indeed, these are all erotic historical romances. I would still call them romances. They have relationship development in them. There's more to it than just like erotica, but there's, you know, you're gonna get a lot of steam on the page in all of these. You get kind of a variety of tropes. Maybe unsurprisingly, given who some of these authors are, a couple of these go in some slightly kinkier directions, and you get some diversity, which was appreciated. In terms of general tropes, 3 of these are age gap romances. 2 of those have a younger heroine and an older hero, so the Duke is significantly older and the heroine is like 18-ish, something like that. In one case, she's got a thing for her intended future uncle-in-law. So she's betrothed to someone she's not into, and she's interested in the man who would be her uncle-in-law. And then the other one is a young woman who's been carrying a torch for her father's best friend. So there's those. The 3rd age gap is with an older woman and a younger man. She's a governess for 2 young girls, and when their older brother comes back from university, she starts to notice him as a young man, and it turns out that he's had a crush on her for many years, and his dad died and he's now the Duke, and that relationship is gonna go places. And this one does have a like instruction element of it. She's a governess and she's gonna teach him about the ways of the flesh, basically. So the 4th novella is probably my favorite in the collection, if I'm being honest. This one was by Nicola Davidson. Our heroine is the spinster daughter of a vicar who's kind of controlling fire and brimstone type of guy who scares off all of her suitors because he wants his daughter to keep house for him so he doesn't have to pay anybody else to do it. He's kind of terrible. But his daughter does not want to die a virgin, so she decides to, with the help of her friends, who are some of the best side characters, we'll get there, seek out a discreet man who she can hire to be her short-term lover, so she can have that experience, and she ends up hiring the Duke. So they have a contract, and it's great. They end up falling for each other. I really enjoyed this one, and the way that it all came together, I thought it was great. The 2 friends that kind of mentor her through the process are hilarious. They are these 2 older women who are companions. They were in a long-term domestic romantic relationship with each other, but during a time period where women in those relationships were companions. And so I really, really enjoyed that one. And then the final novella in the collection is from Adriana Herrera. This one, which I think is also my feeling about American Christmas, easily could have been a full-length novel. There was so much there and I kind of wanted more from it. with than maybe what we got in the length that we had, but I did think it was a really solid story. Our heroine is a biracial immigrant from, I think, like the Dominican Republic maybe, or someplace, to London. She runs an apothecary shop and wants nothing to do with privileged people, but for various reasons ends up in Paris for a few days with the Duke, and sparks fly, and it was great. It was really fun and sex positive and diverse in ways that actually happened during that time period. So in general, really good collection. I think if you are looking for some super steamy historical romances, this is a good collection to check out. It's not going to be for everyone, obviously. If you don't like romance or if you don't want that level of steam, maybe stay away from it, but I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy this. I think it was very well put together, and I gave it 4 stars. The next thing I read was also not on my TBR, so some of you who are Audible members might know that they recently introduced the Audible Plus catalog, and the type of membership that I have gives me access to that. You get unlimited access to a select library of titles, and I was kind of scanning through seeing, oh, like what could I listen to that's already on my TBR, and I found a book that was on my TBR. So I listened to Remember Me by Chelsea Babulski. I enjoyed this. I kind of hate the cover, to be honest. I don't think the cover was doing this any favors. It came out last year. If you hadn't heard anything about it, I'm guessing that's why. I got this for free from a publisher at like an event as a giveaway item, not for a review, but just like, I mean, I'm sure they hope you would review it, but it was as a giveaway. This was really interesting. It's like kind of YA horror, but like light on the horror. It's set at this old hotel and has multiple timelines and reads a little bit like a ghost story. I don't want to spoil what actually ends up happening in the book, but it reads a little bit like a ghost story with a possibly haunted hotel in the modern day timeline with a girl who's recently moved there with her dad, who is in the hospitality industry, and weird things start happening. And then we have a past timeline following a young woman in 1902 who is going to be forced into an arranged marriage to help solve her parents' financial problems, but her fiance is pretty terrible. And so the story kind of goes from there. I won't spoil what ends up happening, but I found this to be really atmospheric and spooky. I generally really enjoyed it. In terms of thematic content, a lot of what this is taking on is misogyny and patriarchy. You should know in terms of content warnings that beyond just some of the spooky horror type stuff, there are scenes of sexual harassment and attempted rape that are on the page that get kind of intense near the end of the story, so know that that's there and use caution. I enjoyed my time with this. I do think, without saying too much about it, I wasn't necessarily convinced to buy into the ending or what happens. Like the things you find out, I was like, okay, I'm not sure I really buy it, but we'll go with it. So for those reasons, I gave this book 3.5 stars. Whew, okay, we're getting there. Okay, then I listened to another book in that collection of the short stories. This one is by N.K. Jemisin, who I love, and it's called Emergency Skin. It's another kind of post-apocalyptic story, I guess, where this guy is in a spaceship headed down to Earth on a mission where they think Earth has been sort of destroyed and he needs to get some genetic material to bring back to his colony, and maybe everything is not the way he expects. It's a pretty short story and I don't really want to spoil what happens, but I think this feels very much like N.K. Jemisin in terms of the thematic content, and it's doing a lot in a pretty short story with the world building and with the themes that it's tackling. I enjoyed it, and I think part of what it's doing is imagining, what if we didn't have racism and white supremacy and fat phobia and ableism and misogyny? What might that be like? And I like that as a project. I wanted a little bit more from it, but again, it's a short story. Like, how much can you really do in this space? I think it's pretty good for what it is, and I gave this book 4 stars. 2 more books to talk about. First one, I'm not really going to say much on, but I finally finished my reread of Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angelis. This took me like 3 months, guys. Not because it's a bad book. I love it. It's one of my favorite books of the year, so I'm finally going to put it back on my favorite shelf where it belongs. But just because I had so many other things I needed to read, so I'd like get into it and then I'd be like, well, that's not a priority, so I'll just like leave it. But I was like, I need to finish this. I finally finished it. And I still really loved it. It's so atmospheric. I'm very excited for book 2, and I'm kind of glad I read it again because I hadn't read it since March, and this will help have it fresh in my memory heading into book 2 whenever ARCs get sent out. Hopefully I will get one. We'll see. So yeah, really loved it. Finished my reread, and I'll link my review video of this up above if you haven't seen it. I will say, so I'm starting to see some more mediocre reviews of it, and I think the people who are not enjoying this want more plot. They want more fast-paced plot. They want more answers. Whereas I really enjoy just spending time with the characters and in this world with the atmosphere. It's very atmospheric and gives these like lush descriptions of the settings where things take place, and I really enjoyed the mystery. I didn't necessarily want all my questions to be answered right away. I'm happy to wait on some of those for book 2, so you know, depends on what you're looking for, but this is something where you're not going to get all your questions answered, or even most of them answered. Some of them, if you pay close attention, do get answered, but you have to like read closely. Anyway, but I loved it, so read that. Okay. And the final book that I read this month is one that was sent to me unsolicited by Glasstown Entertainment for review, and honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect. I was like, okay, the premise of this is really interesting, but anytime you pick up a novel written by a public figure, it's kind of like, you know, hit or miss with whether it's going to be good or not. I'm happy to say I think this is very good for what it is. I just think you need to go in knowing what it is and what it isn't. This book is Hush by Dylan Farrow. Dylan Farrow is the daughter of Mia Farrow and Woody Allen, and Hush is a YA dystopian fantasy that is really about gaslighting and abusive power structures and the importance of speaking up and speaking the truth. So here's what this book is not. It is not an in-depth, detailed, epic fantasy world that's going to give you all of the world building you might want from that sort of book. This is a book that I would recommend for readers who like a good book with good characters, but a book that is really about conveying ideas, and in this case I think conveying the experience of an idea, particularly gaslighting. So I ended up really loving this, and I do think we get a strong character, but most of the complaints that I'm seeing of the book are, I feel like, maybe not understanding what this book actually is and what it's trying to do. So it's not going to be for everybody. I know I say that about so many books, but I feel like this really is maybe not going to be for everyone, but I think it's a powerful and important book. And what I think it does very well is it gives you the opportunity to be inside the experience of being gaslit, not just by one person, but by an entire power structure, to the point where you are not even sure what's real. You don't know if what you think you saw is what you actually saw, and you don't even trust yourself, and you're not sure if you're sane. And I think knowing who the author is makes that even more poignant, of the fear and the uncertainty and the horror that goes with that, not to mention the horror of finding out that a person you cared for and trusted maybe isn't who you thought they were. All of that is mixed in here in the story of this 17-year-old girl set in this dystopian world where a elite group of people, mostly men, control writing and storytelling, and supposedly this is for the protection of people. But this young woman grows up in a small impoverished village. She lost her brother to this plague, and then she finds her mother murdered, but murdered is a forbidden word, and like she's made by a person in the position of power to think that she imagined things, that her mother wasn't actually murdered, she died a different way, and her friends don't believe her and kind of push her out, but she's determined to find answers. And so I'll stop there. I don't want to tell you too much more about the plot and where it goes, but those are the themes of this book, and I think it does them really well with a story that's enough of its own thing that it's not super on the nose in terms of being so much of a direct analogy or metaphor. One other thing I do want to say about this is that even though a lot of this, I think, is commentary on the gaslighting of victims of sexual assault, there is no sexual assault in the book. There are other kinds of violence and psychological abuse that take place in here, but there is not actually sexual assault in the book, even though metaphorically that's a lot of what it's talking about. That's what Hush is. I really loved it. I gave this book 5 stars, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to read it. I hadn't really heard people talking about it, and yeah, if that sounds appealing to you, I think it's worth a read. Whew, there you go. Those are the 15 things that I read in the first half of the month. I had a few really good things in here and some more thought-provoking reads, and like talking through them, I'm like, okay, there were like a few really solid books. Talk to me in the comments down below. Let me know any of your thoughts or feelings on anything I talked about in this video. And for your question of the day, tell me about a book that made you think. Whether you loved everything about the book or didn't love everything about a book, tell me about a book that made you really sit and ponder some kind of a theme or an issue or something that was being brought up in the book. I feel like I had a few of those this month, and I appreciate that. I think it's nice to have in the mix. Talk to me about yours in the comments below. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you want to see more, and if you want to support the work of the channel, check out the Patreon linked in the video description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.